He can act like he's listening, but he's not hearing anything I say. Are we good? Okay. Map moments. Been working on your maps? Do I need to check with your dad? Dad, have we been working on our maps? What's that, Augie? Yes. Now, the quail and manna hasn't happened yet in the Bible, but we're getting close, aren't we? And we colored it. I colored mine this week. Did you color your quail and manna this week? Yeah. Yeah. In fact, what did we actually do this week? Traveled. Yeah. Camped for a little while by the Sea of Suf, right? Well, I know they needed water. You know, a big camp like that still needs water. I know. What if it flooded? That'd be bad, wouldn't it? But think about it. I mean, think about all the campgrounds that we have. Isn't there often lakes and small and large? Because that's where we like to camp, right? We like the lakes and we like the trees. So, anyway, but other than that, they didn't do a whole bunch. Now, let's think about this, though. Remember when the pillar of fire and the pillar of the cloud showed up? It was on day 2 of unleavened bread. So it's been about 30 days now since the cloud and the fire showed up. 10, oh no, more than 10. We're only about halfway through. Yeah. So think about this. Try to imagine yourself, you're in the Israelite camp, and the first day, I mean, day 1, when these things show up, you're like, whoa, that is so cool. Nobody's ever seen anything like this before. Nobody's ever seen anything. Right, Elliot? Sure. I'm going to go ahead without you, though. Is that okay? All right. And Moses explains to him, you know what that is out there? That's your God. That is Yahweh. That is Yod-He Vav-He out there in the cloud. And then nighttime came, and there was this fire, and it lit up the whole camp. Now, that's various artists' renditions of what that might have looked like. We don't know for sure what it looks like, but yeah, yeah. You know, and so that first night, probably several nights, you're like, and days, you're like, whoa, I don't have to wonder where God is. He's right there. He's right there. And it says when they would stop, that the cloud would go, or the fire would go over the tent of meeting, and Moses would go out and talk with God. So this is pretty cool, right? But now we're at day 30. You think you're quite as excited? Think you get up in the morning, you go out, yeah, there's the cloud, there's the fire, it's still there. Yeah, I'm thinking I would. I mean, you know, we as humans, we get used to stuff, right? It's like, that's not such a big deal anymore. Yeah, God's with us, yay, okay. Maybe you would. Maybe us adults are more cynical. Maybe we. Yeah, kids are still like, wow. You know, if I was a kid, I'd be out there and I'd like throw a rock at it to see if the rock goes through or if it bounces off. I mean, I would. I know. It's crazy, isn't it? All right. So anyway, just want to talk about this a little bit, about how sometimes God does really amazing things. And when he does them a lot, sometimes we're like, yeah, that was God. Yay, God, you showed up. And we shouldn't be like that, should we? Yeah. So it's always a big deal when God shows up. Yeah. And we're on our 50 days to Shavuot, which God says is a divine appointment. We're going to talk about that in just a little bit. Divine appointment means God's going to show up. We need to be ready because he's going to show up. It's his appointment. He made it with us. You know, if you had an appointment with your principal, G2, if you and your dad had an appointment with your principal, man, you'd show up, right? And if you got in the office and the principal wasn't there, you'd be like, what? You made the appointment, right? Okay. So, but other than that, not much has gone on, right? We're going to have times in our lives when Yahweh is silent. And sometimes that gets a little hard. You know, when he's not saying much. We're not learning much. It seems like we're caught in a pattern, just daily life. But what does Yahweh say what we should do when he is silent? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 times in Deuteronomy he says, remember you were slaves. Now, if I'm remembering when I was a slave, what am I going to think about? I'm going to think about how I got saved from being a slave, right? Well, yeah, you're going to think about how hard it was, but you're also going to think about how Yahweh showed up with all of his plagues, and he got me out of there. It's a good idea when God is silent to remember the things he's done for us in the past and know that he's still working. We just don't see it right now, but he's still working. He's still doing what he said he would do. Elliot.
But I thought, but I wasn't in the Bible, so I wasn't in the Israelites, so I'm not slave.
No, you've never been a slave. Oh, we're talking, no, well, yeah, we are talking spiritually, but we're also talking about, history is important.
Technically, doing chores and not slavery for the love of God.
What is it? What? Okay, I could enter into that argument, but I'm not going to. Let's move on. Precept steps. We're going to pursue God through the Torah. All right, so this Torah portion, Emor, which means speak to the people. Yes. And you see other things up there? You see a lemon or an etrog, a palm branch. There's a menorah. Okay. Why do you think all that stuff is up there? Because one of the main things in this Torah portion is that we are going to talk about the feasts of the Lord. That's in chapter 23. But first, we're going to talk about chapter 21 and 22. Not for very long. But there's lots of things in these chapters about how the priests are supposed to do things. Okay? Yeah. What they're supposed to do when they mess up, et cetera, et cetera. And we just a few lessons ago, we had a couple of chapters about how the priests were supposed to dress, what the garments they were going to wear, and how they were to perform their duties. All right. So there's lots of stuff in Leviticus about priests. Now, again, we need to think about this a little bit. When Yahweh brought him out, he said, I want you to be a kingdom of priests, a kingdom of priests. And you're like, what? I've never seen a kingdom of priests. I've seen a kingdom with priests, but a whole kingdom of priests where everybody's, that just doesn't compute. God is saying something to them that they have never thought of before. They've never seen an example of it before. They've never thought of it before. And that's why Leviticus is there, because he's teaching them a whole new way that nobody has thought about before. Okay, Elliot?
But that would make sense because there would only be priests and there would be no kids and just.
Well, there would be kids, yes, because you can't be a priest until you come of age.
Priest, if there's no second generation.
Yes, the first time we were created, we were
the whole world.
we were fully human, fully in our prime. But still, God made the way to where the men and women together. They eventually, one of them. I'm not going to go.
Okay. All right. So what is this new concept God is telling them? He's like, I want you to be different. I don't want you to be like everybody else. Everybody else has priests in their kingdom. I want you to be different. And to emphasize that, he started with the high priest. He gave him special clothes to wear, right? Hang on, Elliot. Let's finish this. Special clothes to wear. And then he went to the Levites. And he said, you have to wear special clothes too. They're not like the high priest's clothes, but they're special clothes. So the high priest is very different. The Levites are different from the high priest and the people. the people dressed in normal clothes, but he said, maybe you're dressed normally, but I want you to act different. And that's what the book of Leviticus is all about. I don't want you to steal. I don't want you to lie. I want you to have fair weights and measures. I don't want you to kill your children for Molech like the others do. I want you to be different. Okay, Elliot.
I'm just thinking right now. But what if no? But then if there's too much priests in the world, there's just be priests in the world. There'd still be plants and homes, but
Well, I think the problem is, hang on, Elliot. I think the problem is that we get the idea in our heads that priests have to be in special robes and in a church or something. And that's not true. Priests are simply people who put God on display and show other people who he is.
So basically, that's the managers. The rest of them are the workers, and then the others are just the visitors.
The others are the body, the assembly.
Is the priest higher command than the scribes?
The scribes.
The scribes.
Scribes just wrote down stuff.
Scribes may or may not have been Levitical. They were kind of like lawyers. Yeah. So they were more employees of the temple. Probably most of them were Levitical, but I don't think they had to be. Somebody can correct me on that if I'm wrong. Okay, so do you get the idea? I want you to be different. I don't want you to be like all the nations around you. When you go across the Jordan, when you enter into the promised land, I don't want you to act like they do. You are to be different, and I'm giving you all these parameters to tell you how to be different. All right? Now, let's fast forward a little bit here, and I'm only going to talk about this briefly, but there came a time when the prophet Samuel, the people came to the prophet Samuel and they said, we want a king. Now, people say that, some people say, and I'm not going to disagree with them, but I have another idea, that God was upset with them because they didn't want God for their king anymore. They wanted an earthly king. Maybe. But I find it interesting. Hang on, Elliot. Let me finish my thought, and then I'll let you talk, okay? In Deuteronomy, Yahweh says, Moses says, that there's going to come a time when you want a king. And he spends several verses talking about parameters for that king. Yeah, okay. All right, so was the problem that they asked for a king? I think the real problem was they said to Samuel why they wanted a king. They said, we want a king like the other nations. Whoa, wait a minute. Weren't you supposed to be different? Okay. They said, we want a king like the other nations have. We want a king like them that can lead us out into battle. Well, who's been leading them out in battles up to that point? Yahweh. Okay. So it wasn't so much that they wanted a king, is that they wanted to be like the nations, and they lost their calling. See, God says you've got to be different. And they're saying, no, we want to be like everybody else. Elliot.
Oh, but Moses was was the king Saul? No, that was the Israelites.
Yeah, that was King Saul. King Saul was what they got when they asked Samuel.
That's human nature that someone wants to be like everybody.
It is. And we are called to fight human nature and do what Yahweh says. Like meet on the Sabbath. Does everyone do that? Mm-mm. Yeah. There are people that do, yes. But, he calls us to, it says in another passage, he calls us to be peculiar people. People need to see, and you know why? He tells us why in Deuteronomy. So that they will look at you and say, oh my gosh, look at all these laws they have. They are such a wise people. What a wonderful God they must have. That is why God says, be different. All right. Leviticus 23. This is the meat of it here. All right. Tell the people of Israel. Can I put my glasses on? Yeah, it's sad, isn't it? Tell the people of Israel the designated times of Adonai, which you are to proclaim as holy convocations. Okay? There's a Hebrew word for that. The Hebrew word there is mikra. Mikra. And it means a sacred assembly. It can mean a rehearsal. Right? So when you see that holy convocations, it means you're going to get together. You're going to assemble yourselves together. Okay? And my designated times. That's another word we're going to talk about. There is a rule when you're studying the Bible called the rule of first mention. Okay? And sometimes when we want to know what a word really means, a Hebrew word really means, if we go back to the first time that it's used, it will help us understand. That rule is not hard and fast. And sometimes, if you're not careful, you can make it say things it doesn't really say. Okay? So you need to be careful, but there is a rule. And in this case, it's a good one. All right? Rule of first use. The first use, this word was used in Genesis 1. And that's a chiasm. Do you know what a chiasm is, G2? Not exactly. No. A chiasm is a literary structure. Hang on, Elliot. This is very important. It's a literary structure that points to something. It's like you're going and finding buried treasure. It's not obvious in the text, but the chiasm will tell you this is X marks the spot. This is where the buried treasure is. Yes, Elliot? Yeah, go ahead. All right, so it seems, now we notice in the creation story, it's very interesting. You go through the 6 days of creation, that in the first 3 days, God really doesn't create all that much. It says he separates. He separates dark from light. He separates land from sea. He separates sky from waters. Waters below and the waters above. Okay, so he's separating. And then days 4 through 6, he takes those things as he separated and he puts stuff in them.
It's also interesting that he made us laugh.
Yes, it is interesting. And of course, because he's a good God. All right. Now, notice he separated light from dark on day 1, and the corresponding day is day 4. He makes the sun, moon, and stars. Well, where are the sun, moon, and stars? Well, they're where the lights are, right? Okay. He makes the sky on day 2. Day 5, he makes the birds. Okay. Day 3, he makes land. And then day 6, he puts animals on the land, beasts, and eventually man. Now, if you count, I have not personally done this, but I have read that if you count all of the Hebrew words from the first day of creation through the making of the animals, if you count all the words and you find the word that's directly in the middle, it is Moedim. It is Moedim. God said, let there be lights in the dome of the sky to divide day from the night. Let them be for signs, seasons, days, and years. And the word seasons there is Moedim, which is exactly the same word that is translated designated times here. Moed. Moed is singular, Moedim, plural. Okay. So, if it's smack dab under the treasure mark X in Genesis 1, do you think this is important? Ellie's just going to hide.
Wait.
Yeah.
I actually read something. So you know how if you read the first book of the Bible, right? The very first sentence, if you translate it in Hebrew, it literally says Jesus' name in the first sentence.
Oh?
Which kind of makes sense because it was God told Paul to make the books and a few others to make the books, which kind of makes sense that they would probably hide that Easter egg there.
You're exactly right. You brought up Easter egg, which I wasn't going to. It's a common term that's used for when they hide things in movies and stuff, right? Yeah. Yeah. That's exactly what I was talking about with the chiasm, and the X marks the treasure spot. You got to hunt for it. You got to dig for it, but you can find it. Moed. Okay, so what are the moeds? Party time. That's what the moeds are, for the most part. Now, there's the Day of Atonement, which is pretty serious. Okay. Passover, relatively serious. Okay. But especially Shavuot, Sukkot, Feast of Trumpets, party time. Okay. And why did God give us party times?
Rest.
He wants to celebrate just as much as we do. He loves it when his people rejoice, right? And what are we rejoicing in? Well, another thing that he does is, if you look at the feasts, they tell a story. And he's saying, keep the feasts, learn the story. Once you learn the story, learn to trust the story. You know, when God said at the end of the creation story in Genesis chapter 1, he looked at creation, including man, by the way, and said, it is tov, which is good. But he said more than that. He said it is tov meod, which means exactly the way I want it. Exactly the way I want it, and it's going to function exactly the way I want it to function. This is what the feasts are about, to remember that we were created tov meod. Trust the story. God is good. He says his creation is good. And he wants us to remember that just like that, his plan of salvation is also tov meod. It's working. Okay? So, first of the feasts. We sing this every Shabbat. Verse 1, 6 days of the week anticipate and seek the first of his feasts. You ever wonder why that line was in there? Because it's the first feast mentioned in Leviticus 23. The first of his feasts, okay? Seventh day, Shabbat of complete rest. For in 6 days Adonai made heaven and earth, the sea and everything in them, but on the seventh day he rested. This is why, Bible says it very clearly here in Exodus, this is why Adonai blessed the day, Shabbat, and separated it for you, for himself. He wants us to come and spend time with him every week. And in verse 5, we have in the first month, on the 14th day of the month, between sundown and complete darkness, comes Pesach, Passover, for Adonai. Okay? So that's why we did Passover this spring. Remember we're doing Passover and eating unleavened bread? Because it says it right here in Leviticus 23. That's what you're supposed to do. And you're supposed to keep the festival of Matzah for 7 days. You are eating matzah. On the first day, have a holy convocation. What's that? What's the word for that?
Spaghetti. What? You said matzah.
What's the word for holy convocation? We just learned it.
Yeah.
Do I have to go back and do these slides again? Really? Mikra. Okay? And something else happened on Passover. Yeshua was crucified. Well,
Wait. It was part of it. My music teacher actually read a story to us once. It was about the 3 trees. I thought it was a cross. Yeah, one tree became a cradle for Jesus' birth.
mm-hmm.
The other became something else. The last one became the very cross.
Okay. I put tree up there because there's discussion among the adults as to whether it was actually a cross or if the appropriate interpretation is tree. Okay. At any rate, Yeshua dies on Passover. Okay. What's our next feast? What do? We did first fruits, right? We waved the barley. Remember that? Okay. Because that is the first fruits. Barley was the first crop. And it has a seed. Anything with a seed can be in biblical language is a fruit. Anything that bears seed. Okay. Try not to work at it too hard, you two. All right. So, first fruits. Anything happen on first fruits besides waving barley leaves? Yeshua rose from the grave. Okay? Are you seeing the connections here? He died on Passover. He rose from the grave on first fruits. Bingo! Everything's happening on feast days. All right. So what's the next feast? That's the one we're working on right now. We're coming up to Shavuot. From the time after the day of rest, that is, from the day you brought the sheaf for waving, you are to count 7 full weeks. We're doing that right now with our map, right? And what feast are we working towards? Shavuot, right. And we're to bring 2 loaves of bread. That's one of the verses. Anything happened on Shavuot that was important? Huh? He rose a little. That's a good guess, though. He rose a little bit before Shavuot. It was the day of Pentecost. Remember reading about that with the tongues of fire on their heads? Okay. All right. And there's also fire on the mountain. So there's fire on the mountain, and there was fire on their heads. And the word was given. And the word was given on the day of Pentecost. If you don't believe that, read the sermon of Peter. Okay? All right. So let's think about this now, because there's some more feasts. Well, this is, yes, there's Sukkot. All right. So something important in the New Testament has happened on every feast day, right? Okay. So what's the next feast day? Tell the people of Israel in the 7th month, the first day of the month is to be for you a day of complete rest for remembering. A holy convocation. Mikra. All right. Announcing with blasts on the shofar. What do we think? The Bible's pretty much, after Pentecost, there's just like letters and instructions and things. Nothing's really happened. So maybe we're looking at future events. Yeah?
Has nothing to do with this. But you know how it says nothing about how John died? It says it about
John the Baptist or John the Apostle?
The disciple. You know how it says it about every other one, but it doesn't say about him? I'm not saying this is real, but there's a theory that he probably didn't die.
I think if you look in extra biblical texts, historical texts, you will find that he did.
Okay. No, like, Duncan, you know how,
Yes, I done.
Yeah.
Right? And some people say Elijah didn't die, that he was just taken off in the chariot. Yeah. Okay. So what do we think might happen on the next feast day? Maybe Yeshua will come back? It would make sense, wouldn't it? And think about it. Here in 1 Thessalonians it says, for the Lord himself will come down from heaven with a rising cry, with a call from the ruling angels, and with God's shofar. Wait a minute. Does that tie us to the Feast of Trumpets, where we blow the shofars?
40 years of life.
You're going to get it. That prayer is going to get answered whether he comes or not, because you just get a new life. All right. Day of Atonement, 10th day of the 7th month. We just talked about the Day of Atonement last week, so I'm not going to spend much time here. Remember the 2 goats and going into the Holy of Holies, right? So what future event might happen on the Day of Atonement? Well, there's a lot of opinions on that. Maybe judgment. Maybe a judgment seat. Maybe Yeshua making atonement for the bride that he's gathered.
What bride?
I don't know. Just some ideas. But you can bet. Yeah, bride. Yeah, we're the bride. His people are the bride. Okay, we'll get into that another day. We'll get into that another day, guys. All right? So, I don't know. There's some ideas. People have lots of ideas, but you can bet something important will happen because it's a feast day. That's the pattern. Okay? And then there's Sukkot, Ellie brought up. Nope, that is correct. There is Sukkot and then there is Sukkah, which are 2 different things.
It's not thought it was CECOAOAT, not SUKKOT.
I'll let you discuss that with your dad. Okay? Tell the people of Israel, on the 15th day of this 7th month is the feast of Sukkot, for 7 days to Adonai. You are to live in Sukkot for 7 days. Every citizen of Israel is to live in a sukkah. Okay, Sukkot is a celebration. The temporary house we build is a sukkah.
But we do 10. Call them mobile home.
Now, Dale's going to build a really nice one this year. I saw a picture of it last year, or 2 years ago, maybe. Okay, so what future event might happen on the Feast of Sukkot? Well, a lot of people think the marriage supper of the Lamb. Okay, it's all symbolism, guys. All right, who is the Lamb of God? Jesus, Yeshua. Okay, so this is Yeshua having his marriage feast with the people who believe in him. So that's his bride, that group of people. All right. Probably the beginning of the millennium, which if you don't know what the millennium is, we're not going into that today. But it's 1,000 years when Yeshua is going to physically rule on the earth. All right. We're not going to talk about 1,000-year-old people. All right. Hebrew letter of the week. I got to tell you, I struggled with this letter. Yeah, it does. It looks like a P. It's called a kuf or a kuf. I saw it spelled, I'm not kidding, guys. I saw it spelled 8 different ways. Sometimes it was QOF or PH. Other times it was KOF or PH. And then it was QUF or PH. And then it was KUF or PH. Your guess is as good as mine. What it means is to be behind. And it's a picture of the sun on the horizon. Its numerical value is 100. Here's a couple of words that start with quof. Kuf. Help me out, Kathy. How do you say it? Kuf? Okay, so a monkey is basically kuf. Okay? And then there's another very important word to learn, kadosh. Kadosh starts with a kuf, and it means holy. All right? That's how you make it? Yeah. Notice that there's a space. You know, when you make a P, you take it all the way to the line, right? But it's very important on a kuf that there is a space. Okay?
What's so important? Kadosh. It isn't what song? And Joshua Aaron's song "You Are Holy," doesn't he? In that one part, he's in cut.
Yes. And that's the Hebrew. The Hebrew for holy is kadosh. So he's actually saying the same words, just in Hebrew. Kadosh atah. Okay. And you see atah up there? Atah kadosh means you are holy. Okay. Cool. Good catch there, Ellie. All right. Miss Kathy's got activities for you.